Hey, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, safe morning, safe evening, depending on where
Yeah,
you are.
let's hope for that one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a crazy time in Florida after a record sleepy start to a season of hurricanes that was expected to be forecast to be, active from the beginning. There's La
We're making up
Nina.
for it. We're making up for it now.
Yeah, so kaboom, here we go. I'm Andy Revkin. This is a pop-up uh, episode of Sustain What? My question mark interrogatory set of
Inter, in,
conversations.
Interrobang implied.
Yeah, sustain what? Don't talk to me about say sustain what. So here I am with Craig Pittman, who has for decades been one of the key journalistic lenses on particularly environmental issues around the west coast of Florida, across the state. He's written some great books. He's the guy who, for me, you've probably seen countless headlines or tweets. Florida man does X, gets eaten by an alligator, or and Craig has compiled this whole idea of Florida man into a book. You're in. Where are you right now?
I'm in a hotel room in Largo. I was going to stay in my house that was built in the 1920s and has survived everything, but it's a mandatory evacuation zone. So they said, get out. So I got
Right.
out.
And so on Twitter and elsewhere, we're exploring, this quite monumental and historic storm. This is
Yeah.
one that, well, we'll see. You tell me, give me a sense, like how many hurricanes came through or that you covered or dealt with in your time on the staff there?
Oh, gosh. A lot. Uh, the big one for me in my experience has been Hurricane Andrew, 1992,
Right.
hit South Florida. It was a Category 5, and then we had another Cat 5 with Hurricane Michael. I didn't go through that one, but I reported some on the consequences of it, which people are still dealing with today. That was 4 years ago, and they're
Right.
still picking up the pieces from that hurricane, just as folks in the Keys are still picking up from Irma, a few years before that. So I guess that's the one thing I would remind people is, yeah, the hurricane's here today, but the consequences of it are going to be lasting for years afterwards. And of course, the reason for those consequences, the building in low-lying areas, the inattention to trying to stop climate change, et cetera, were years in the making.
Oh, that's for sure. And this whole issue of building vulnerability. I mean, I've dealt with it for decades too. We see this. I was in Dauphin Island, 2004 for Hurricane Ivan, the arrival there, Category 5 that just dipped into being Category 4 as it came ashore in Alabama, Western Florida. And there were people on Dauphin Island like a day later who were not bereft. They were there like saying, yeah, we're going to build back better because we're going to get our our checks and all is good. I mean, how did you avoid just complete despair thinking about that kind of pattern?
How do I avoid complete despair? I live in Florida. There's constantly bizarre and funny things that happen here. I mean, even during Ian, our governor doing one of his live updates on the storm said this is going to have a tremendous impact on the golf course. I mean, Gulf Coast. So,
Oh my God.
yeah, you know where his mind was. So yeah,
Yeah.
that you know. Florida, I call Florida, it's not correct to call it the Sunshine State. We actually get more rain than sleepy and soggy Seattle, but I prefer to call it the most interesting state because there's something happening all the time that you go, wow, a guy
Yeah.
punched a swan today, you know?
Yeah. So like, can you cast your eyes around the warning area here? We've got terrible storm surge forecast for an area centered around Fort Myers, I think. And take us along that coast. I could show that graphic in a
Well,
second.
the thing I would point people to is not Fort Myers, but the other city in that metro area, which is Cape Coral. The First Street
Right.
Foundation last year, or year before last, did a big survey of all of the metro areas, basically all the residential property across the United States, and they determined that Florida would be the number one at risk from flooding that would damage property. And the number one place in Florida that's at risk is Cape Coral. And
Wow.
that's where the storm is. And the reason Cape Coral is so at risk is it was one of those get rich quick developments built by guys in the 50s who put in, they took this swampy area covered with mangroves, dredged up the bay bottom there, and turned it into Cape Coral, America's water wonderland, advertised by Joe Garagiola on TV. And
Wow.
the lots were all built to be about a foot above sea level at the time. And you know what sea level's done since then. So they're pretty much at sea level, and here comes the water.
Right. There's a wonderful geographer from Villanova University named Steve Strader. Here's the surge map. Steve has this technique he developed with Walker Ashley, another geographer, where they kind of look at data for housing over time. They
Mm-hmm.
look at data for hazards over time, like hurricanes.
Right.
And they create this expanding bullseye methodology. And Steve just this morning posted this of Cape Coral. It shows you, hurricanes are changing because of climate change, but human landscapes are changing way faster.
Yeah.
And
Cape Coral,
here we go.
Lee
I'll show
County.
you.
It's in Lee County, which has been seen a tremendous amount of growth, particularly in the 2 years of the pandemic, as people have moved down here. It's the free state of Florida. Well, guess what? You're moving into a place where you're going to be buried under storm surge in a few minutes.
Wow. So let me see if I can get this to work again. Did it go all the way through? Hold on. Yeah, 19. Here we go.
Yep.
So you're watching. That is growth in a zone of implicit hurricane hazard.
Right.
Low-lying lands, near coasts, near waterways. My grandparents and my parents lived in Florida for the last couple of decades of their lives, and we got to navigate these little canals and stuff. So the water just
Mm-hmm.
goes everywhere there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the whole point of building it as finger canals is everybody gets a waterfront lot. Well, here's the downside of everybody having a waterfront lot is the water comes up on your lot, and it goes back to being the swampland that it was before. As the storm surge comes over and the excessive rainfall that's also a product of climate change comes in as well.
So what you still write a column and stuff. Tell folks a little bit about your output and your work experience on this. What drew you to be an environmental reporter for sure?
I always credit John D. McDonald. I grew up in Florida, grew up in the north end of Florida in Pensacola. I was in a Boy Scout troop, so we went camping and canoeing. My dad took me hunting and fishing because that's the Southern man's excuse for walking in the woods is if you carry a gun, it's okay. I read mysteries, loved reading mysteries. And when I was 14, my great aunt took a big drag on her Pall Mall and said, "I think you're ready for Travis McGee now," and handed me a copy of John D. McDonald's first Travis McGee mystery. There's a scantily clad woman on the cover. I'm 14. So of course I said, "Yes, ma'am, I'm ready for that." But reading McDonald, I discovered that, he was a Sarasota resident. He slipped in lots of environmental messages into his books, lots of talk about, fast buck artists trying to pave over the state. And he depicted this as pretty much a sunny place for shady people. And it taught me, that, that the parts of Florida I loved for camping and canoeing and walking in the woods were at risk, and that there were people who didn't care about those values and would, fill in a bay to make a fast buck. And so when I got to be a reporter, I covered, county government and politics and stuff like that, and started to see sort of how that stuff worked out in real life, that McDonald was not really exaggerating at all. And so for 20 of the 30 years I worked at the St. Petersburg Times and Tampa Bay Times, changed its name, I covered environmental issues statewide here in Florida, which really it's the best beat in American journalism because, number one, they pay you to go out and ride around on a boat now again. But number two, you get to cover some of the really wild stuff that goes on in Florida, like the pythons battling alligators for supremacy in the Everglades, and a religious group that smuggled giant African land snails into the state, thinking drinking their mucus would make you healthy. It actually had the opposite effect. Um, and obviously, I had to write a lot about climate change too.
Sure.
And so, at the start of the pandemic, the paper downsized. I was laid off, but fortunately, I was able to get a gig writing a weekly environmental column for the Florida Phoenix, which is an online news organization based in Tallahassee. And I just turned in a column a few minutes ago, actually, writing about Hurricane Ian, climate change, and how Ron DeSantis keeps saying he doesn't want to do any left-wing stuff to battle climate change, nothing to hurt the fossil fuel industry. He's content to just do the resilience thing, just to, build barriers and so forth to protect waterfront property owners, which really doesn't help anybody in the long run, because you just have to keep doing resilience over and over and over again.
Right.
And, that's, it's I compared it to having a car with a leaky front tire. And what's your better bet here, to keep pumping air into the tire like he's doing, or to replace the tire and actually deal with the problem?
Yeah. And this is one of these classic, to me, it's the and story. A lot of people get stuck in this binary way of thinking about it. Oh no,
Mm-hmm.
no, it's you got to stop the gases. You got to stop the emissions. Oh no, no, it's you got to adapt. And unfortunately, we have to do both with the same vigor right now, because especially because of the vulnerability issue. It's not
Yes.
everyone who's vulnerable. It's poor people. It's people who've been dislocated or marginalized because of their race or history or poverty. And there's so much that can be done to reduce their vulnerability to storms, even when there isn't a climate change signal right now, that would be missed if we just were thinking about reducing emissions of greenhouse gases. Uh,
Yeah.
One of the issues that drives me crazy, it's not so much a Florida thing as a U.S. Southeast, is tornadoes. Steve Strader, the same guy who did that um, expanding bullseye shot of Coral City. Wait, did I get it wrong?
Cape Coral.
Cape Coral. Sorry.
Yeah, Cape Coral.
He has done work over and over again through the Southeast, showing how fast the mobile home and manufactured home boom has spread through the Southeast in tornado zone.
Yeah.
And if anyone's thinking tornadoes are going to slow down because of global warming, they're missing all the science, which says actually for tornadoes, we don't really know what's going
Well,
to happen.
and a massive hurricane like Ian is already spinning off tornadoes.
Of course.
So that's something you have to deal with. Hurricane Michael, one of the worst places to suffer from Hurricane Michael was actually the town of Mariana, which is nowhere near the coast, but was just torn apart by one of the massive tornadoes that Michael spun off.
Amazing. So how do you keep your energy too? It's like, here we are. We've been covering these issues for a long time. I have my own. I don't know. I don't know what drives me, but what drives you to keep at it? You're
Well,
old enough. You could just kind of go to that golf course that the governor was talking about.
well, number one, I only play on golf courses with windmills on them. That's a ironclad rule for me. But number two, I just feel like I anytime I feel, writer's block coming on, or some sense of I can't do it anymore, I just look at my mortgage statement and I find a new purpose in life. So,
Oh, that.
yeah. Yeah. Plus, having two kids in college helps.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, mine are done there, so that gives me a little more flex, perhaps. And these scenes unfolding are really something. Talk to me a little bit about the. There was this kind of hurricane drought for a while, and and some of these areas have not been hit in decades, especially Southwest Florida has kind of threaded
Well,
the needle.
Southwest Florida has been very fortunate since Hurricane Charlie 18 years ago. But a lot of people are saying that Ian is following Charlie's path, but is bigger and
Hmm.
badder than Charlie. So, I mean, I guess the thing is, how big is your sample size? You
Right.
say, oh, it's a hurricane drought of 18 years. Well, but if you look at 100 years, yeah, there's not been a drought at all. It's just where they go. Florida is the place where Florida's the state that has been hit by more hurricanes than any other state, and it's
Yeah.
like we're the chin that the North American continent sticks out in the Caribbean and says, "Hit me," and they do. And if it were up to me, all of the 900 new people who moved to Florida every day would get a brochure when they arrived that would show them everywhere a hurricane has hit in Florida,
Hmm.
where the nearest Waffle House is, because of Craig Fugate, the former FEMA head who was from Florida. He's the one who famously declared, when the Waffle House is closed, you know it's serious then. And it would list certain, there'd be a tutorial on hurricane terminology, like you'd be taught that spaghetti models do not pose for the cover of Italian Vogue. Um, uh, the cone of uncertainty is not a Horcrux thought by Harry Potter, and Saffir Simpson is not Homer's brother. So, oh, and there'd be one more tip: if you see Jim Cantor, run the other way. That's
Yeah, I think we just saw him a little while ago on Twitter. Here's the Florida man story right here. The Florida man taking selfie gets washed away. I
well,
mean,
yeah. I
it's
mean,
not quite there.
it's it's just such a Florida thing to do. Oh, look, there's the southernmost point, which, by the way, is not technically the southernmost point of the United States. The
Hmm.
real point is on the Navy base nearby, but you can't get access to it. So some smart tourism-minded promoter put that buoy there and declared, "Oh, this is the southernmost point." So everybody goes there, not realizing that once again Florida has fooled them.
Amazing. Well, southernmost practical point.
Yes,
Yeah.
southernmost
I
point you can get to without putting on a uniform.
yeah, I mean, what you just said is interesting because I've written quite a bit about what I call disaster amnesia. This goes for earthquakes, all kinds of things where decades pass, and unfortunately, the biggest, worst, most extreme versions of something, whether it's a hurricane or an earthquake, are rare, right? So,
Yeah.
like in the Pacific Northwest, the Cascadia Fault, which last erupted and fissured and created a tsunami, was 300 plus years ago. And Washington State and Oregon really don't get a lot of earthquake activity of a low level.
Mhm.
So, but they get these calamitous ones every
Right.
300 years. Same thing for hurricanes. I've written about this work called paleotempestology, which is these scientists who go around the coasts of the United States and elsewhere looking for what they call overwash, where that beach sand ends up in the marsh
Mhm.
back of the beach. And you can going down through the layers, just like going back in storm history. And like Hurricane Michael was, a lot of people depicted it, including the media, including one Tallahassee Weather Service tweet, as unprecedented. And maybe they meant the disaster was unprecedented, but the storm was entirely there. It's just you have to go back
Yeah.
farther in time. So you got that disaster amnesia issue. But then with these, what you're describing, people who move to an area is disaster
Mhm.
naivete, right? It's
Yeah.
like a whole nother
Yes.
thing.
Yeah. It's like people who move into wildlife habitat and say, "We didn't know there were bears here," and then suddenly there's
Right.
one hanging out by our hot tub. Well, guess what? We have
Right.
bears in Florida, and sometimes they like to come back to the place they used to live before you got here.
Oh, and the alligators in the swimming pools.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah. Wow. Well, there's so much to explore. What's your days? You're in a hotel right now. You said
I'm
you're
in a hotel
home.
right now. Yeah. Yeah. Just filed my column. Thank God, because the Wi-Fi went out for a little while, but then it came back in. So I was able to meet
Good.
meet. I was able to meet deadline, which of course is the only thing all journalists care about. So
That's right. Yeah, here we are. So you're at the Florida Phoenix, and
yes.
your most recent book is out, right? It's
Yeah, it came out in paperback. The state you're in, Florida Men, Florida Women, and Other Wildlife. And it's done so well that the publisher reached back 12 years and pulled a book that hadn't sold very well called Manatee Insanity and put that out in paperback too, with a 2-page update on what's happened in the last 12 years. So I've got two
oh my
paperback
God.
books out at the same time.
Manatee Insanity. Yes, that's some. I think the only time I was on that part of the West Coast where the tsunami like surge is coming was when I was writing about the manatee issue.
Hmm.
And boy, the politics got really weird.
Yeah, it was kind of a glimpse ahead of Trumpism. Honestly, some of the people who were parading around with a big cross labeled property rights and a sign of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service with bullet holes in it, things like that. So, yeah, it got crazy.
Wow. Let me see if I could show this. Yeah, so here's your book.
Yes.
The state you're in. Yeah, what a state the state is in. What's your take on the politics before we do? We'll just talk a few more minutes about the storm, and then I'll see if there's questions. Oh,
um,
there are some questions
oh,
and comments. We can get to those too.
okay. Um,
So, what is the state of politics there?
well, uh, all eyes are on Ron DeSantis, who is supposed to be the next Trump, if Trump doesn't get if Trump doesn't get out of his way, at least. And so, he's running for reelection. And the irony to me is he's really running for 2 years, not 4 years, because obviously he doesn't want to be here. He wants to be in Washington. Um, and he just barely got elected in 2018. He just barely beat Andrew Gillum, the black mayor of Tallahassee, who was under federal investigation. So he had a couple of strikes against him already in the minds of some white voters, and DeSantis just barely managed to win. And since then has governed as if he's only responding to the people who voted for him and not to the people who didn't vote for him. He has spent a lot of money on things involving the environment, Everglades restoration, resilience for the coast, things like that, but has not signed on to anything else. So, for instance, he promised to fix the toxic algae bloom problem here in Florida, which resulted in the big manatee die-off. Actually appointed some qualified scientists to study the issue. They prepared a list of recommendations. They all kind of got ignored. And so that's a really big broken promise that people still talk about. Nevertheless, he got endorsed by one environmental group, the Everglades Trust. So they like the fact that he's spending a lot of money on the Everglades. Meanwhile, he gives developers everything they want. He is, in fact, one of his closest advisors is a Jacksonville developer. So, and he's supported these really expensive toll roads that only benefit the builders and doesn't benefit the rural areas that they go through that would mess up habitat and so forth. And he gets whatever he wants from the legislature, pretty much. The leaders of our legislature have pretty much bowed down to him as much as they possibly can, even when he's screwed them over a few times. So, and meanwhile, he has appointed a majority of the members of the Florida Supreme Court now. So he pretty much has the state government in his hands. And the guy running to replace him, hoping to beat him, is Charlie Crist, who is now a Democrat, used to be an independent. Before that was a Republican. And as a Republican, served as governor. He had lots of problems. I always say Charlie had more baggage than the Miami airport. But he had a really good environmental record. He is so far the one and only governor who actually said climate change is a problem for Florida and we need to tackle it, and then actually did some things about it. He stopped the building of a coal-fired power plant near the Everglades. He signed some executive orders to start changing the state's building code to be more environmentally efficient, environmentally friendly. He ordered switching state government buildings over to alternate fuel sources. So, of course, once Charlie left to run for a U.S. Senate seat, he lost to Marco Rubio. Those things all went out the window because Rick Scott became governor. And Rick, of course, who always said, "I'm not a scientist," when anybody asked him about climate change. So at least DeSantis is an improvement over that. At least he's doing the resilient thing. So that's better than Rick Scott. But, the state most vulnerable to climate change, which I contend is Florida, has had these leaders in place for 12 years now who won't do anything to stop climate change. So,
right. I heard that in the Miami area there was more serious engagement on at least on sea level rise across the political spectrum.
On that, and also they actually have appointed a heat czar about a year ago.
Right.
They have someone who is in charge of looking for ways to mitigate heat for people who live there, especially people who can't afford to, to buy air conditioning and things like that. So they are ahead of the game, but they have to be because they have these problems with king tides and day sunny day flooding there. So
Sure.
it's hard to deny climate change when it's lapping up around your ankles.
For sure. So, are there any places on the planet you crave to go, or is this just such a target-rich environment for you as a journalist and commentator that there's no need to think about going anywhere else?
I will never run out of Florida stories to tell. It's just, it's such a great place, and and I sometimes people accuse me of hating Florida, which of course is obvious. It's completely untrue. I often sing the praises of Florida. There are great things about Florida. Foremost among them, we've got this wonderful state park system that's won national awards 4 times,
Hmm.
which no other state has won that many. We've got more freshwater springs here than anywhere else in the world. We got about 1,000 of them. And of course we have the world's most fascinating police blotter. So we we get a lot going for us here.
Yeah. So, by the way, anyone out there curious, just Google for the phrase "Florida man," and you'll in the news, and you'll see what Craig's talking about. So, just the last. Let me go to the questions and comments.
Yeah.
Sorry. Let's see what we got here. If my what's going on? Oh, I see. I have a new computer, so we have prayers. June Hunter sending prayers to
Mhm.
Florida. Stay
Don't
safe.
forget the thoughts. You have to put the thoughts with the prayers, otherwise it doesn't work.
Yeah, well, right. That's for a lot of these
Yeah,
politicians
exactly.
uh, who just now this could be dangerous. Someone says, "Where is the hotel you're in?" Meaning,
I am in a place called Largo, which actually would be a bad place to be if the hurricane was coming here, was going to make landfall here, because this is the part of the Pinellas Peninsula. Pinellas County is a peninsula off the main Florida peninsula, and if it's the narrowest part, so if the water overlapped the Pinellas Peninsula, it would be here.
yeah,
But the point at which I got the hotel was after we saw that it was actually going south of here. So
yeah. Um, yeah, I'm just kind of scrolling down the coast here. There's Cape
mhm.
Coral.
Yeah,
There's a
I feel
fantastic
bad for those
tool.
folks.
Yeah, I know the National Hurricane Center's got they're doing an amazing job, including the Hurricane Hunter overflights, keeping track of the storm. But they have a live interactive version of their warnings,
Mhm.
which is on my blog, revkin.bulletin.com.
Isn't it nice to see our governor actually paying attention to government scientists for a change?
Oh well, I suppose when it's in your direct interest, I suppose it's time to pay attention.
Yeah, he's not calling this hurricane theater and telling everybody, well, you don't have to evacuate if you don't want to, just like you don't have to take a booster shot.
Yeah. Here's another comment. Charisse Udell says, "Much love and support to all my family and friends and everyone in Florida at this time. These moments of tragedy show the necessity of a democracy that encompasses the common good and with leaders whose main goal is service to all."
Very
And
nicely put. Are you available to run for office, by the way, in Florida?
yeah, that really does pack a lot into a few words.
Mhm.
We need a lot more of that. I've
Yeah.
also, I just wrote a piece recently. Bolsonaro in Brazil is about to face a re-election challenge, and there's risk there of him essentially taking over the government process and saying no to pulling it. Imagine pulling a Trump where you have the army in your pocket.
Oh man.
So this issue is way beyond American borders too. She adds here, as our climate warms, we're seeing stronger winds, higher storm surges, and record rainfall during hurricane season, which is also why these storms are becoming more destructive and costly. Heat equals energy, and that energy must go somewhere. Today it is Florida. This is not normal.
You could write my column for me. That's pretty much what my column's about this week.
Oh, good. Do you know when it goes up? When does it
It'll go
post?
up tomorrow morning. So
Okay.
I had to write it before landfall. That was,
Right,
you know,
right.
this is a
Oh,
little
and here's
tricky.
Ronald Gower was talking about the impact on reefs. Ecosystems get.
Well, the reefs have bigger problems right now than a hurricane.
Mhm.
They're dealing with coral wasting disease, which is basically killing off something like 90% of them right now. And so it's such a big emergency that actually Disney and SeaWorld are working together to try and provide a captive breeding space for coral so they can try and counteract that.
That's amazing. Yeah, that there's efforts to do that elsewhere around the Caribbean as well.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, when you think about the scale of, it's not like you can just sort of go out there and reseed all these coral reefs
No,
with new varieties. Maybe small
no.
areas.
There has been some talk of trying to breed the corals that are surviving well in warmer water because of climate change, to try and
Right.
breed some element of their ability to do that into the other corals to sort of crossbreed them. I think that's been proposed. I don't think that's happening. So
Yeah. Well, here you go. I'm trying to keep track of your. Do follow Craig on Twitter too. I'm sure you're elsewhere, but you're doing a really good job there.
thanks.
Um, so let's see. Here we go. Charisse Udell. And if you look at Cape Coral, you'll see many people dismissed the science and decided not to not evacuate. So that's that area we
Yeah.
were just talking about.
Yeah. And there's no amount of plywood that's going to cover you when the storm surge comes in. That's just
Oh
not,
boy.
it's not going to be good.
Well, boy, does that sort of feel like vaccination?
Yes.
Maybe we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Uh, Paula Tourville, riding out Ian in Southwest Florida. Eyewall just coming in.
Man, stay safe.
Yeah,
Hunker
really,
down.
Paula.
Yeah.
Let us know how things go if you are still watching, and we're both pretty easy to track down.
Yeah.
Uh,
By the way, there's a Facebook group called Florida Memes that proposed a new drinking game for the hurricane, and that is you take a slug every time the weatherman says rapid intensification. So,
oh my God!
yeah,
Yeah, actually,
you
well,
get pretty drunk. You get pretty drunk off of Ian because it on Monday it became a hurricane, and now it's almost a 5 here on
truly
Wednesday.
amazing.
So yeah, and that's a function of climate change also, because as the water warms, warmer water feeds stronger hurricanes.
Right? Yeah, that I mentioned some good coverage of that intensification
Yeah.
issue in my piece. It's oh, I see this. Yeah, so just Google for or go on Facebook and find Florida memes, and you'll see some interesting output there.
My favorite
Yeah,
one is
so
the sign that says Florida hurricane evacuation plan. Step 1, grab beer. Step 2, run like hell. So
yeah, in that order.
yes, you don't want to forget the beer.
Right. I remember when I was covering Ivan, I had a rental car and I ran into a market. I got a big bag of carrots, like a pound thing of peanut butter, and maybe that was about it. I was like sleeping in my car, running around
Yeah.
the Tallahassee and westward toward Alabama, and trying to keep track of that storm. I'm sure you've had your adventures
One or
in
two.
fine dining as a journalist
Yes.
covering these
Yes.
things.
Well, I discovered during the BP oil spill that McDonald's is a great remote reporting location, because you get free Wi-Fi, free refills, and the bathrooms are relatively clean. So, if
Let's see. Nancy Kennedy says my friends are in Northport, right?
oh
Right
man,
in Ian's path. Second year Floridians from Washington State. So there's that issue of, well, hopefully not naivete. Hopefully
hopefully
they
they're
know what they're getting into.
yeah. For this one, follow the science and get out of the way if you can.
Yeah, and listen to the authorities.
Right.
A lot of people trash talk FEMA, but part of what they're trash talking is these legislative hindrances
Mm-hmm.
to a lot of really good people who are doing their
Yeah.
best to, um, keep people, help people recover
Right.
from
Exactly.
calamity. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Monica Houghton Williams. I am tired of financing rebuilding these low areas. Yeah, well, as I was saying earlier, what's that term they have? Extreme repetitive loss. Extreme.
Yeah. Yes. ERL.
Yeah,
And
where we've done it over and over and over again.
yeah, and what's the definition of insanity? Doing
There
the
you
same
go.
thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Yeah, it's crazy. And a lot of those are here in Florida. People build in low-lying areas. A storm comes along 3 or 4 years later, wipes everything out. They rebuild it 4 or 5 years further down the road. Here we go again. So,
Right. Yeah, and here's Monica again. The ship has sailed. We need to adapt and reduce emissions. Stop coastal development will help. That idea of
yeah.
managed retreat has become a hot story recently at Columbia University, where I hang my hat, one of my hats. They've had 2 conferences on this. I think it's a terrible name, for one thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, in 2013, I did a Mayor Bloomberg, who was like a leader on climate.
Mm-hmm.
He gave his last speech as mayor before he was going out the door, and he stood on the waterfront in New York City, and he said, "The waterfront is New York City's greatest asset. We will not retreat." And I'm thinking,
Ooh,
what the heck? So I
ouch.
wrote a .earth piece about this. That's like science denial. But then I started saying, like I was talking to young communicators, I'd say, okay, here's your assignment. You're the press secretary to the next mayor of New York City or Miami. And she reads a new report and finally gets it about sea level rise. That's going to be rising for centuries to come. We can slow it
Right.
down, blah, blah. And I say, so your assignment is to write a speech that says, we will retreat.
Mm-hmm.
But that keeps her elected.
But you make it sound positive.
Yeah. So how do you do?
We're going to go. We're going to march rapidly backwards.
how do you like convey that reality in a way that
Yeah.
engages communities? Feels
Mhm.
like it's still a tough question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see. Luckily, you and I get to mostly report on this. I mean, we're both more in a commentator role now.
Yes.
Here's
I'm allowed to have opinions now.
here's another. My cousins live there too. Yakanela Melankov Deb.
Yeah.
Joanne McGarry, who's up in Humboldt County, California. I have a climate change coffee cup that when hot coffee is poured into it, Florida disappears. That's kind of a fun gadget.
I have a friend, you probably know her, Cynthia Barnett, who teaches environmental journalism at the University of Florida. She makes Florida cookies, and then they're Florida-shaped cookies, and they're green, and then she puts blue icing along the edges to show sea level rise creeping up on the land.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, sea level rise never tasted so good.
I'm going to see if I got to find one of those cups. Oh, there it is. I think I found it. Hold on. Climate change mug. Let's see. You too can get your own. Hold on while it loads.
Okay.
I'll put it on screen.
This could be a sponsor for you, Andrew.
Pretty funny. Whoops. Yeah. Well, I got to see. They should have like an animated GIF showing it actually do that thing. There. Look. Wow. This is a major. We're talking about 150 meters of sea level.
Wow.
This looks like all of Antarctica melting, and then you get a very different shape too.
Go big or go home, man.
Oh my God. Let's see.
Thanks, Joanne. That gave us a good laugh.
Yeah, and we have to. This is a super serious time.
Yeah.
The losses will be tallied, including deaths. And again, one thing I have in my story today is that anyone who thinks this is just a coastal issue is missing flash flooding.
Yes.
So you could be driving away from the coast into the center, anywhere where the rain is falling faster than it can wash away, is deadly. So
exactly. Well,
these are super serious issues.
And the heat, the heat from climate change, that affects everyone, coastal and inland. So
well, and as you said, that long tail. My parents lived in Stuart, Florida, right at that point, 2005, I think, when it got hit by 3 hurricanes in 1 year.
Yeah. Well, we actually got four hurricanes in a single year, and all in the space of just a few months.
Yeah, unbelievable.
It was bad.
And one of the big issues was like mold. It was not. It was these residual impacts, as you say. It can be really tough.
You have to deal with for years afterwards. Yeah.
Here's a question a little bit off the storm topic. Are the freshwater springs, all those springs that you talked about, are they threatened by growth?
They are to some extent, because they are suffering from nutrient pollution caused by people putting too much fertilizer on their lawns, leaking septic tanks, and fertilizer on farm fields as well. So, and then they have the the sort of the opposite problem of things going in. They have a problem of things going out, which is these springs are all sort of a window into Florida's aquifer, which is the
Right.
main source of Florida's drinking water. And so the more people we have slurping that water up out of the aquifer, the less the pressure behind the water that's coming up in the spring. So we've actually had some springs that have stopped flowing, and one or two that have even
Mm.
reversed course.
Wow.
It's pretty sad. And the when Jeb Bush was governor, he actually started a Florida Springs initiative to try and help the springs and help them return that flow, help them deal with the pollution problems. They actually had this pretty large, comprehensive effort going on. And then Charlie Crist continued that. And then Rick Scott became governor, and that was it. They just shut them all down. And they are still trying to recover from that.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Craig.
My pleasure.
And good luck to you and everyone in the state of Florida,
Thanks very much.
in the state that it is in.
Yeah, we need it. Thanks
And
very much.
thanks for the writing you do to try
Oh,
to keep things a little bit centered on reality.
thank you.
I
Well,
think
I'm always happy to accommodate a fellow Rachel Carson Award winner.
Oh, that's right. Did you get it just this year?
Just about a week ago, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
I forgot. Yeah, the
Yeah.
Sierra Club. That came out of the blue. I was really, needless to say, gratified.
Well, you were definitely someone who worthy of that award, and I just feel lucky to be, swimming in your wake, basically.
Oh gosh, no. No. We're all charting different paths around the same questions, and for you to keep the sense of humor as you do, your writing is sharp, and I think you're kind of in. To me, it feels like you've been in a competition, in a wonderful one with Carl Hyacin for like most acerbic, cutting, funny Florida commentator, and I hope you see that as a
Well,
as a compliment too.
he's angry. I'm just trying to be mildly amusing. So,
All right. Well, again, this is Craig Pittman. Track his columns at it's the Florida Phoenix, or is it the
Florida Phoenix? Yes. Yeah.
I had that here before. Oh, here we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, that's not it. This is hilarious. I stumbled on this. Escape to Sarasota. Well, what about hurricanes?
Should we mention that when we first talked today, you called me Ian? So it's been a day
I
like
called.
that.
I was phoning Craig and I said, "Hey, Ian," because as like him, this is just completely on my mind.
Right.
And we'll end with here's Ian. This is via the fantastic nullschool.net website, which was created by a programmer some years ago, and it's just a really powerful place to explore our planet. You can see, put Florida in context.
Mm-hmm.
There you are, and you can see that there's other stuff brewing off of West Africa. This little doohickey right here could be the next hurricane to threaten the Eastern Caribbean. We'll see. So again, thanks again for being here.
Sure.
This is as soon as we're done, folks can share this on whatever platform you're watching. It streams to Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter. I'm Andy Revkin at the Columbia Climate School, and I will ask you if you haven't, if you're not aware of it, I do write a column. It's kind of a newsletter, they call it now. I think of it more as a blog than a newsletter. My latest piece was Catastrophe Looms as the Tsunami-like Surge from Category 4 Hurricane Ian meets fast-growing Florida. And this is the daily beat of Craig Pittman. So take care, everybody, and be in touch.
Stay safe.
Okay, so we're going to go off the air, Craig, and thanks